Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Talk Radio. So today I want to discuss something that I saw somebody write about. They called it the monkey mind versus the monk mind. And I thought the topic was really interesting and just a good way to describe something that I've talked about before, but it was a good delineation between the two things that we may currently be experiencing and then the thing that we're hoping to eventually experience. So they called the monkey mind because it's similar to a puppy mind, right? Our ego mind is constantly like running around like a puppy with the zoomies, darting from here to there, from thought to thought. And so another way to put that would obviously be a monkey mind. And the monkey mind, they say, is anxious, restless, and scattered. The monkey mind seeks happiness in external things such as money, fame, beauty, or status. Whereas the monk mind, they talk about, is calm, centered, and focused. The monk mind knows that happiness is something that's cultivated inside of us. The monk mind seeks growth, contribution, and connection. So I wrote a little blog about this topic, and I'm going to read you some of it. So according to the great mystics and spiritual teachers, there are two approaches to living. One approach is to continue looking outward and focus our attention on things beyond our control. Often we are seeking outside validation for acceptance and meaning, seeking wealth, fame, or acquisition of things to buy us happiness. This can result in feelings of anxiety, loneliness, and helplessness, since we are lacking a true understanding of our knowledge and power. Seeking things outside of ourselves instead of looking inward to find what it is that we're seeking. This is what the spiritual masters call the monkey mind, darting from here to there, always seeking, focusing on everything outside of ourselves instead of the things inside of ourselves and the things that we can control. So this is alternative to going inward and concentrating on the things that we have control over, our thoughts, the way we perceive the world, and the stories that we tell ourselves. We can begin to cultivate a sense of happiness, fulfillment, and joy by simply being, by turning our attention to the present moment as often as we can, by expressing gratitude in the things that we already possess, and allowing that to be enough. Setting goals and looking forward to the future is a wonderful endeavor. However, you are able to find happiness within yourself along that journey. Are you forever seeking the fulfillment that's outside of you, or are you seeking it from inside? As we make this small shift to understanding that everything we need to be content is already currently within us, this is often referred to as switching to the monk mind, when we begin to focus on only the things that we can control, our thoughts, our emotions, and our responses, as well as learning to cultivate happiness and acceptance from within ourselves instead of seeking it from outside of ourselves. So again, the monkey mind is focusing on things that we can't control, and when we do that, we lose our center. It's disempowering. And we don't know who we are. It's also numbing through unhealthy habits. The monk mind would be looking inside and focusing on the things that we can control, our mind, and what we choose to tell ourselves. This leads us to focus on things allowing us to feel happy and content. It's seeking growth and connection. So as I was researching this topic, I came across two articles that I found interesting. One was on stress.org. It says 7 techniques to calm the monkey mind. The first was minimize multitasking. So I read something that there is no such thing as multitasking. The brain can only focus on one thing at a time. What we're calling multitasking is our brain switching from task to task simultaneously. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're working in a fast-paced environment, you're focusing on, the document in front of you, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and you're picking up the phone and you're answering that. But your brain cannot literally focus on two things at the same time. So again, the multitasking doesn't exist. It's just kind of a word we've used to describe doing all of these things, switching between all of these things in a short time period. But they say one way to calm the monkey mind, and I agree, is minimizing multitasking. So instead of our brain darting from here to there, which I truly think creates like neural pathways in the mind, that way it's easier for you to kind of spend the rest of your day in that darting mentality and that same kind of energy of that multitasking energy that you were in, it's much harder to quiet the mind when we've been multitasking a lot, when we've had a really busy day. So I do agree that just working on one project at a time, and if you do work in a high-paced environment like I do, I still work in legal, one thing that I've started doing is I won't check my emails the moment that they come in. Unless I see that it's like labeled as urgent, it does not need to be read the moment that it comes in. And so what I've started doing is I will, maybe every hour or so or every 2 hours, I'll go in there and read them and write down what needs to be done. And then I'll get back to what I was working on so that my mind is just focused on this one thing, this one task. And my mind isn't darting back and forth from different things. Another thing that they list on this website is to calm the monkey mind is movement, and I agree. So a fabulous way to do that is through yoga or Pilates or walking. Just being outside in general is a really good way to kind of calm the mind, bring you back to yourself. Another one they list is meditation. And then comedy and laughter. I agree. Laughter is so important to our mental health, but we tend to overlook it as being like frivolous. I can't tell you how often I notice that people, especially in the corporate world, they see laughter or funny memes being passed around the office as something that is a waste of time and frivolous. And I disagree. I think that laughter is so important, and it does help to kind of disconnect us from those worrisome repeating thoughts, focusing on something that brings us joy, brings us laughter. And so I agree. Number 5 is they say music to help calm the monkey mind. And I agree. You can use music as a form of meditation. And I've taught that to people before. Just let's say you're listening to one of your favorite songs and you can choose to focus in. I'll do this a lot. Like I'll focus in on just the sound of the guitar strums, or just the sound of the drums, or just the sound of the musician's voice, And it's a form of meditation. It's a form of focus as I'm sitting there focusing on that thing, that particular noise. Just like you would in meditation, let's say you're focusing on the sounds around you, the sound of birds around you, or whatever it is that you're choosing to focus on. Maybe it's the sound of your own breath. It's the same thing, but you're doing it through music. Another great one that I do is I listen to what's called, I switch between, it's called lo-fi beats. If you just look on YouTube and you look up lo-fi beats, it's just this really chill music that helps to kind of calm me down and bring me to a calmer headspace just while I'm working. And I also listen to Hertz tones. You can look that up as well. And there's thousands of them to choose from. They're all fantastic and they're all very calming, especially again when you're working and during fast-paced activities or something like that, or just if you just want to have a calm moment and sit on your couch with your tea and your pet and just enjoy that. Another one that they list is massage. And then the 7th one to calm the monkey mind, they list as finding meaning. So they talked about finding meaning in the challenges that we face, which I agree with, but I also wanted to add to that and say that something that helps to calm my monkey mind is finding meaning, and not only finding meaning, but pursuing that meaning that I found in my life. When I was, for example, not pursuing the things that I wanted to pursue, when I would sit on my couch and I would, let's say I had a stressful day at work, and then I went and I sat on my couch and I was kind of numbing a little bit through watching TV, just kind of trying to forget the day that just happened. And I felt oddly more anxious sitting there because in the back of my mind, I knew there was all of these things that I wanted to pursue, but I wasn't pursuing them. We've talked about this in a previous episode that one of the reasons, this is my case, I don't know if it's the same case for you, but one of the reasons why I wasn't pursuing things was because of fear. I was procrastinating out of fear. And I'm also a perfectionist, and perfectionism comes from a place of fear, fearing not being good enough. And this is another reason why we procrastinate, which we've talked about before, is because we're afraid that once we do create it, it won't be good enough. So we procrastinate on ever creating it at all. So when you're finding meaning in your life and chasing the things that you know are going to bring you joy, chasing your dreams, because I know you have a dream. All of us do. We all have these ideas of what our ideal life would look like or what we want to share with the world, and half the time we don't pursue them out of fear a lot of the times. But I found that when I wasn't pursuing them, my mind was more kind of all over the place and sitting more in anxiety. And it was because I wasn't pursuing those things. So another great website that I found that was kind of talking about this subject of the monkey mind versus the monk mind was on tinybuddha.com. It says 9 powerful lessons from a monk. So number 1, actually I want to pull up the website because I took notes on it, but I want to pull it up. Hold on, give me 1 second. One second. It had a lot of good information within the paragraphs that it was talking about, so I just want to pull it up real quick. Okay, so 9 powerful lessons from a monk, and this is again on tinybuddha.com. So the first one he says is keep trying until you get right. Some of the most important lessons that he's learned in life was a lot of times the lessons aren't learned unless you keep trying. Sometimes we try once, we fail, and then we move on. Number 2 that he lists is the answers to your questions are inside of you, which I think we talked about earlier in this episode, where the monkey mind, you're constantly seeking things that are outside of you to bring you fulfillment, to bring you happiness, but the monk mind is seeking those things within us and knowing that everything that we want, everything that we need, the love, the support, everything that we want can literally be found inside of us from ourselves. You are the person that you're seeking. I think I posted something earlier this week that a lot of people resonated with. It was a quote that said, "Get up, nobody's coming to save you," or something like that. Love the universe. And a lot of people resonated with that. I remember when I first read that quote, it was hard to read because I thought, well, F you. And I don't want to save myself. This was years ago when I read it. And I think especially as children and as women, we fantasize about this like knight in shining armor coming to save us, coming to rescue us. And trust me, you might have beautiful, wonderful partners in life, and that's fabulous, but they're not going to save you. They're not going to rescue you. You have to rescue yourself. You have to save yourself. You have to love yourself. You have to support yourself. So that answer, that love, whatever it is that you're seeking, it's inside of you. It's not going to come from anybody else. It may come, like I kind of look at it this way. The self-love that I cultivate, the moments where I'm extremely proud of myself, things like that is the cake in my life, right? I create that cake. I create that love. I create that abundance and that fulfillment. Anybody else, my beautiful friendships, any other relationships that want to come into my life, my family, they're just the icing on top of the cake. Like I bring that love and fulfillment to myself. Anybody else who wants to love and support me is just the icing on top. So another thing that they list is, again, these are 9 pieces of wisdom from a monk. Real wisdom in life comes from doing something and failing. Absolutely. The other day I had a speech in Toastmasters where they kind of talked about this topic, and I think the question was, what have you learned from failing, or what do you find like positive out of any experience of failing? And so what I ended up talking about was And I don't necessarily consider this a failure, but I think that some people would. So now that I'm really starting to scale my business, there are constantly times where, because I have to kind of be a salesperson and get out of my comfort zone and email people and say, like, listen, I'm offering this and I think that you would really love it, that sort of stuff. And sometimes I get no response at all. People just ignore you. You'll see that they've read it, but they've completely ignored you, which is fine. They probably get a lot of, that same content. But then sometimes you'll get people that are really negative and they'll respond like, do not pitch me, or I've had some really negative responses, and or people just say, no, I'm not interested in, don't email me again, sort of thing. But at first I kind of saw those as tiny little failures. But then I really started thinking about it and I'm like, they're not though. I've learned so much from those interactions. And I've also kept like an Excel sheet of the different types of, because you're constantly, when you own your own business or when you're in sales of any kind, you are constantly kind of manipulating isn't the right word, but you're shifting and tweaking the stuff that you're doing. You notice that some stuff works and some stuff doesn't, so you're constantly tweaking it or changing your message or changing the way you go about contacting people. And in that way, with these small little failures where I see where things don't work, I've learned the things that do work and the things that do bring me business. Another thing that I realized is, this was about 3 months ago, I said, let me try advertising, right? And so I advertised for my business on LinkedIn for a month, and I also advertised on Yelp for a month. I spent $1,000, and that's not chump change. Like, that came out of my savings. I'm not bringing in a whole lot of money with the business yet. I'm getting fabulous feedback, but it's not like my full-time job yet. And I remember after I got no business from those sales, from that marketing, no business at all. And I spoke to a marketing guy about it last week, and he was like, yeah, that happens. I can't tell you how often that happens, where businesses will spend money on marketing and then nothing comes from it. And it felt like a little bit of a failure, right? I was like, oh, I really was hoping for something more from that, and it didn't come. And that small failure, again, wasn't necessarily a failure, because I know that next time I just won't approach it that way. Either if I do marketing again, I'll change up the way that I'm doing it, or maybe I won't market on those certain spaces. Maybe I'll choose a different space. I don't know, but all of it I've learned from, and all of it I'm so grateful and thankful for. So our failures are never really failures, because we always learn so much from them, and I'm so thankful for that. Another one that he lists here is, when you start to meditate, you will start to recognize the ego mind, which helps you to calm that monkey mind. So I believe I've spoken about this before. This is so popular. This topic of the ego mind is so popular right now that I think what I'm about to say, all of you have already heard, but here we go. In case you haven't, your ego, that voice inside of your head that, is constantly talking, that sounds just like you, it's not actually who you are. It's just a tool inside the mind. It's just the ego part of your mind, the ego voice. And when you start meditating and you start realizing, okay, that voice isn't actually who I am, and a lot of times that voice is super negative, based on past experiences, past trauma, social conditioning, etc. But when you start to realize, like, hell, half the time that voice is false, and it's telling me false things about myself and about others. It's judging others, it's judging myself, it's worrying, it's thinking about worst case scenarios, etc. When you start to realize, okay, first of all, that voice isn't me. Second of all, I can quiet that voice, or I can work to shift that voice to more positive and truthful thoughts. It's extremely helpful. It's extremely eye-opening. It's what a lot of people call having a spiritual awakening. And so when you recognize that the ego is going down that negative train track, you can say to yourself, well, shh, we're not paying attention to that right now. You can kind of talk back to the ego voice and thereby learn to quiet it and come back to ourselves. Number 5 he has listed here is, we must be both compassionate and resilient. He lists a Taoist proverb, which, so beautiful. It says, you have to remain cotton on the outside, but steel on the inside. So what they're saying essentially is we must remain soft and compassionate and loving towards the world, but not weak. That doesn't mean allowing people to step on us. That doesn't mean not holding firm boundaries. You can be compassionate but still have boundaries. There was another quote that I read that was something like, compassion without boundaries is self-harming. Because there comes a point where, and I don't talk about this a lot, but here we go. I have certain family members that aren't the most supportive, aren't the most loving people. And so I've started to just pull away from them because my peace is more important than whatever it is that you're going through. I get that, when people are mean and say harmful things, say judgmental things, etc., they're dealing with their own war internally and projecting that onto me. But it still doesn't make it okay, right? Like, I have compassion for this particular family member that I'm speaking about, and I have compassion for what she's gone through, but at this point you need to heal, and until you heal, until you start to change your behavior, you just won't be a part of my life. So again, it's cotton on the outside. I have love and empathy for her, and I still love her very much, but steel on the inside. I still hold those firm boundaries that until you change your behavior, you're just not going to be part of my life. So with these two paths, with this path of the monkey mind or the monk mind, which one obviously would we rather choose, right? Would we rather choose focusing on everything that is outside of us, or focusing on things internal, things that we can control, focusing on realizing that our ego voice is not our own, it's not actually us, right? It's just programmed negative thought patterns, and we can talk back to that voice and we can work to shift that voice. And it's also learning to be in the present as often as we can, but not feeling shame when we aren't in the present moment. Because as one of my favorite teachers, the guy who owns the app 10% Happier, Dan Harris, he has a quote that says, "Nobody can be in the present moment at all times unless you're enlightened. Congratulations, or you're dead. So sorry." It's very hard for the average person to be present at all times, including myself, and I'm an avid meditator. I've been a meditation instructor for the past 6-7 years, coming up on 7 years. So even for me, it is hard to stay in the present moment at all times, but that's okay. It's any time that we remember that we're not in the present, or we want to be in the present, taking that moment to practice mindfulness, to come back into the moment, to pay attention to the subtleties that are happening around us, the sound of birds, the sound of our breath, the sound of our children playing, if they're, whatever it is, and focusing on that and focusing on just what's happening in the present. So hopefully you found some benefit from today's episode. One thing that I sometimes forget to mention to you guys is, because sometimes I kind of I think of them as the same entity, but they are not. I teach a meditation on the Insight Timer app every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify or Pandora, if you log into the Insight Timer app, search for my name, Megan Shirey, you'll see any of the live events that I have scheduled. And again, I teach a live event, a live guided meditation every Sunday at 10. So that just ended about an hour and a half ago, but you can catch me next week or moving forward. I'm also a mindfulness coach. If you're interested in a session with me, just visit my website, go to meganshirey.com. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy these episodes. They're recorded every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and then they are available on every major podcasting platform Monday morning at 7 a.m. If you love this content, please leave a question, an episode idea, or a comment or a review. And may you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease. Thank you so much for joining me, sending you infinite love and light, and until next time.